Every perfect heist needs a cover-up. For history, that cover-up was the tragic death of Patsy Cline. And the stolen jewelry? That was the entire legacy of Cowboy Copas. While the world mourned a rising star, they quietly erased a returning king. They buried the memory of the hit Alabama and one of the most spectacular comebacks Nashville has ever seen. This is the story of that heist. And it's time to take back what was stolen. To understand a man, you must understand the land that raised him. Lloyd Estelle Copas was born on July 15, 1913, on a rural farm near Blue Creek in the Appalachian foothills of Ohio. This was America before the electric grid, a pre-industrial world where life revolved in cycles dictated by the sun and the seasons. It was a land of back-breaking labor from dawn to dusk, of dirt roads that turned to mud when the rain came, and of a deep, abiding connection to the land. In this isolated environment before the spread of electricity brought radios to every home, entertainment was a homemade creation. Music was not a product to be consumed. It was the glue that held the community together. It was the sound of a fiddle sawing through the cool night air at a Saturday barn dance. The tight, sacred harmonies of voices singing gospel hymns in a stark white country church, and the lonely, contemplative strum of a mail-order guitar on a front porch after the chores were done. The musical traditions of this region were a rich tapestry woven from ancient Appalachian ballads carried over from the British Isles and the raw emotional fervor of spirituals. It was music that told stories, eased burdens, and bound a community together. As a boy, Lloyd was captivated. He spent countless hours with a cheap guitar, his fingers patiently finding the chords to the songs he heard from his family and neighbors. Then came the miracle of the battery-powered radio, a fragile connection to a vast and exciting world beyond the Ohio hills. The airwaves brought the sounds of the hillbilly music that was gaining a foothold in the national consciousness. He would listen, mesmerized, to the broadcasts of powerful radio stations like WLS in Chicago with its world-famous National Barn Dance, and especially WLW in nearby Cincinnati, whose Midwestern Hayride show was a regional institution. These programs were more than just music. They were grand, live theatrical events, complete with comedians, string bands, and charismatic solo singers. They created a new kind of American celebrity, the radio star. For a prodigiously talented farm boy like Lloyd Copas, these broadcasts weren't just a revelation, they were an escape route, a blueprint for a life beyond the plow. The rise of the singing cowboy phenomenon, led by silver screen idols like Gene Autry and Roy Rogers, also provided a powerful cultural archetype. They were heroes who were decent, reliable, and always had a song ready. This combination of authentic folk tradition and romanticized cowboy imagery created the perfect cultural stage for a young man with a smooth voice, a knack for the guitar, and a down-to-earth charm. Lloyd Copas was a natural talent. His warm, smooth baritone voice was immediately appealing, but it was his skill on the guitar that set him apart. He wasn't just a strummer. He was a gifted picker with an innate sense of melody. As a teenager, his local reputation grew as he entered and consistently won talent contests, often besting musicians twice his age. He understood that talent alone wasn't enough. It required hustle. He and his first band, the Gold Star Rangers, began making a name for themselves on the Ohio radio circuit, eventually landing a coveted spot at WLW in Cincinnati, the very station he had grown up listening to. This was the life of a regional radio star in the 1930s and early 40s. It was a constant grind of live daily broadcasts often sponsored by local businesses like flour mills or patent medicine companies, interspersed with a grueling schedule of live appearances at theaters, dance halls, and county fairs across the region. It was here he learned the craft of performance, how to connect with a live audience, and how to project warmth and personality through a microphone. His career took a significant leap forward in 1940. He moved to Knoxville, Tennessee, a bustling center for country music, to join one of the most popular and innovative acts of the era, Pee Wee King and his Golden West Cowboys. This was a major league opportunity. The Golden West Cowboys were not a typical hillbilly string band. They were a sophisticated professional orchestra, known for their polished arrangements, flashy Western-style suits, and a sound that expertly blended traditional country with the more danceable rhythms of Western swing. They even controversially for the time used drums and an accordion, pushing the boundaries of the genre. Lloyd's role was that of the featured vocalist and rhythm guitarist. It was his voice that graced some of Pee Wee King's biggest hits, including their iconic version of Tennessee Waltz, a song King co-wrote that would go on to become a global standard. It was during this period of national exposure that he acquired the nickname that would become his identity. One night, a radio announcer at WNOX in Knoxville, enchanted by Lloyd's easygoing, unpretentious stage presence, told his listeners, "He's a real cowboy, folks." The name was a perfect fit, not because he was a man of the range, but because he embodied the quiet, decent, and authentic spirit of the cowboy archetype. The name stuck instantly, and Lloyd Copas became forevermore Cowboy Copas. After several successful years touring and recording with King, Copas felt the undeniable pull to step into the spotlight himself. He had paid his dues as a featured player and was ready to lead his own band. In 1944, he made the bold and risky move to go solo. He returned to Cincinnati and signed with a scrappy, ambitious new label, King Records. It was a perfect match. King Records, under the legendary Sid Nathan, was becoming a powerhouse, recording raw, authentic country and R&B music that the major labels often ignored. Copas's timing was impeccable. The nation was just emerging from the shadow of World War II, and there was a deep public appetite for songs that spoke to the experience of soldiers and their loved ones. His very first solo release for King Records was Filipino Baby, a sentimental ballad about a sailor's love for a woman in the Philippines. The song was a runaway hit in 1946, striking a powerful chord with a country full of servicemen returning from the Pacific. The success of Filipino Baby was his entry into the big leagues. That same year, he received the highest honor in country music, an invitation to become a member of the Grand Ole Opry. At the age of 33, Cowboy Copas had arrived at the pinnacle of his profession. The Opry stage in Nashville's Ryman Auditorium would be his musical home for the rest of his life. The success of Filipino Baby was not just a hit record. It was a key that unlocked the most sacred door in country music. In 1946, Cowboy Copas was invited to become a member of the Grand Ole Opry. To understand the magnitude of this achievement, one must picture the Ryman Auditorium on a Saturday night in the post-war era. The air, thick with the smell of popcorn and sawdust, buzzed with an electric anticipation. This wasn't just a concert. It was a live radio broadcast, a national ritual piped into millions of homes. To be a member of the Opry was to become part of the American family. For Copas, stepping onto that hallowed stage was the culmination of a lifetime of work. He quickly became one of its most reliable and beloved fixtures. He wasn't a flamboyant showman like his friend and Opry patriarch Roy Acuff, who would balance a fiddle bow on his nose. nor did he have the tortured, poetic soul of a Hank Williams. Copas's appeal was rooted in his calm, confident professionalism. He would stride to the single, imposing microphone at the center of the stage, his guitar held expertly, and deliver his songs with a smooth, effortless baritone that was as comforting as a familiar voice on the telephone. He was the steady hand, the consummate pro who could always be counted on to deliver a flawless performance. His recording career, anchored by his success at the Opry, flourished under the banner of King Records. King was not a slick Nashville label. It was a gritty, independent powerhouse out of Cincinnati, known for its raw, authentic recordings of both hillbilly music and what was then called race records, or R&B. This environment suited Copas's unpretentious style. The hits kept coming, songs that perfectly captured the zeitgeist of a nation grappling with the memories of war and the anxieties of a new atomic age. Signed, Sealed, and Delivered was a jaunty, hopeful tune about love confirmed, while 'Tis Sweet to Be Remembered was a poignant waltz-time ballad that spoke to a deep-seated fear of being forgotten. These songs weren't complicated, but they were deeply human, and they made Cowboy Copas one of the most consistent hit makers of the late 40s and early 50s. But the world of popular music is a fickle and unforgiving one. As the 1950s progressed, the ground began to shift under the world of American entertainment, and Cowboy Copas found himself on the wrong side of a new cultural divide. The tremors came from two directions. The first was the explosive, revolutionary sound of rock and roll, the raw, primal energy of Elvis Presley, the swagger of Carl Perkins, and the frantic piano pounding of Jerry Lee Lewis captured the hearts and minds of America's youth. The polite, structured world of traditional country music suddenly felt tame, old-fashioned, and utterly irrelevant to this new generation. The second blow came from within Nashville itself. A new production style, the Nashville sound, was taking over Music Row. In an effort to compete with pop music, producers like Chet Atkins and Owen Bradley began smoothing out country's rough edges, replacing fiddles and steel guitars with lush string sections, sophisticated piano, and smooth background vocalists. This new sound created superstars like Jim Reeves and, ironically, Patsy Cline. Cowboy Copas, with his traditional guitar-driven style, suddenly found himself a stranger in his own musical home. He was too traditional for the new Nashville sound, and far too staid for the rock and roll rebellion. The musical trends that had made him a star for a decade turned against him with brutal speed. The hits, which had once seemed so effortless, dried up completely. In 1955, in a move that symbolized the end of an era, King Records, the label he had helped to build, dropped him from their roster. It was a devastating professional blow. For the first time in 10 years, he was a man without a record contract. Imagine the psychological weight of that reality. To be a beloved member of the Grand Ole Opry, to be greeted by applause every Saturday night, and yet to be told by the industry that you are no longer commercially viable. The fall from the charts was steep. He was forced to rely more heavily than ever on the grueling, soul-wearying grind of touring, playing smaller venues and traveling endless miles just to maintain his livelihood. This was his professional wilderness, a 5-year period where it seemed the music world had passed him by. Many of his contemporaries from the 1940s faded away during this period, their careers becoming casualties of the changing times. But Copas was a survivor. His work ethic, forged during his barnstorming days in Ohio, was relentless. He kept his sacred spot at the Opry, which served as his anchor and his connection to his loyal fan base. He never gave up. In 1960, a lifeline appeared in the form of a deal with Starday Records. Starday was an independent label, a haven for traditionalists and artists who didn't fit the slick Nashville mold. Their records were aimed squarely at a hardcore country audience, sold in truck stops and rural general stores. No one, likely not even Copas himself, expected this move to produce a major hit. Then he recorded a song that would become the most spectacular second act in country music of its time. The song was Alabama. It was an anomaly, a quirky and utterly infectious earworm that defied easy categorization. It was a saga song, a long narrative list of all the things, from Possum in a Pan to Pretty Girls, that made the state of Alabama special. It had a driving, almost novelty-like rhythm, and a spoken word bridge that was perfectly suited to Copas's warm, conversational style. The song was a massive, unexpected, and runaway hit. It didn't just climb the country charts, it conquered them. Alabama shot to number 1 and stayed there for an incredible 3 months. It crossed over to the pop charts, making Cowboy Copas a household name once again. The comeback was triumphant and complete. He had proven the entire Nashville establishment wrong. The man they had written off was now looking down at them from the top of the charts. He followed Alabama with a string of other successful singles for Starday, including the jaunty guitar instrumental Flat Top, and a successful re-recording of his classic Signed, Sealed, and Delivered. Cowboy Copas was not just a survivor. He was a conquering hero. He had weathered the rock and roll storm and the changing fashions of Nashville, and had emerged on the other side more popular than ever, purely on his own traditionalist terms. Away from the stage lights, Lloyd Copas was a man whose life was defined by a quiet, unassuming decency. His most cherished role was not that of an Opry star, but of a husband and father. He was married to his wife, Lucille, for over 3 decades, a union of remarkable stability in the often turbulent world of show business. He was a doting father to his 3 daughters, and his greatest joy was the time he spent with them at their family home, a beautiful ranch he had built on a hill just outside Nashville, which he had lovingly named Cope's Mountain. This property was his sanctuary, a sprawling testament to his success where he could indulge his love of the outdoors and live the quiet country life he had never truly left behind. His cowboy moniker was a perfect reflection of his character. In a business filled with flamboyant personalities and carefully crafted images, Copas's charm was in his utter lack of pretense. He was known throughout Nashville as one of the true gentlemen of the industry, a man of his word, quick with a smile and a kind word for everyone, from fellow superstars to the stagehands who moved his equipment. This fundamental integrity is the key to understanding the final fateful hours of his life. In late February 1963, a wave of grief swept through the Nashville music community. A popular Kansas City disc jockey and concert promoter named Cactus Jack Call had been killed in a tragic car accident. Call was more than just a businessman. He was a beloved friend and a tireless champion of the Opry stars, a man who always went the extra mile to support them when they toured through his territory. To honor his memory and, more importantly, to raise money for his devastated wife and children, a massive benefit concert was immediately organized in Kansas City. The call went out to Nashville, and the response was overwhelming. Dozens of stars, a veritable who's who of the Grand Ole Opry, volunteered to fly in and perform for free. For Cowboy Copas, a man who held loyalty and friendship as sacred duties, there was never a moment's hesitation. He would be there. The concert, held on Sunday, March 3rd, at the Soldiers and Sailors Memorial Hall in Kansas City, was a deeply emotional and cathartic event. Backstage, the atmosphere was a somber reunion of old friends, a community coming together in shared grief to support one of their own. After the final curtain fell, the performers were faced with the task of getting back to Nashville for their various commitments. The weather, however, had turned grim. A massive storm system was moving across the Midwest, bringing with it a forecast of heavy rain, thick low-lying fog, and dangerously high winds. Many of the stars, including Copas and his fellow Opry member, Billy Walker, had wisely booked tickets on a commercial airline flight scheduled to leave the next day. It was the safe, sensible choice. But Patsy Cline's manager and pilot, Randy Hughes, was eager to get back to Nashville in his private single-engine Piper Comanche. He offered to fly Patsy and a couple of others back that night or the next day. Here, in the quiet moments backstage, a simple act of kindness would lead to a terrible tragedy. As Billy Walker would recount for the rest of his life, another performer was in a bind and desperately needed to get back to Nashville, but was having trouble securing a flight. In an act that was entirely in keeping with his character, Cowboy Copas, the veteran star, stepped in. He gave up his confirmed seat on the safe commercial flight and offered it to his friend. He told them not to worry about him. He would find another way. He would take one of the open spots on Randy Hughes's small plane with Patsy and Hawkshaw Hawkins. It was a simple act of generosity, a quiet favor for a colleague, a decision made out of kindness and a desire to help. And it was a decision that would have fatal, irreversible consequences. On the afternoon of Tuesday, March 5th, despite numerous stark warnings about the severe weather from ground crews at the small airfield where they had refueled, the group decided to press on. Randy Hughes, though a relatively inexperienced pilot, was confident he could fly under the storm. A little after 6 p.m., in the midst of a driving rainstorm and thick fog over a densely wooded area near Camden, Tennessee, the small plane, flying low to stay out of the clouds, vanished. The next morning, the search party found the wreckage. The triumphant comeback of Cowboy Copas had been silenced forever by a final tragic act of kindness. The legacy of Cowboy Copas remains one of country music's quietest and most complex debates. While he was undeniably a major star, a long-standing member of the Grand Ole Opry with a string of chart-topping hits to his name, a question lingers about his ultimate place in the genre's history. Was he a true innovator who pushed the boundaries of country music, or was he a masterful and beloved traditionalist who perfected the sounds of his time? However, any memory of his career is profoundly shaped by the tragic circumstances of his death. He died in the same plane crash that claimed the life of Patsy Cline, whose own massive stardom was exploding into a legend of mythical proportions. In the countless retellings of that day, her immense fame has unintentionally cast a long shadow over Copas and Hawkshaw Hawkins, turning them into supporting characters in the final act of their own tragedy. The crash itself was a devastating blow to the Nashville community, robbing the Grand Ole Opry of 3 of its cherished stars in a single, terrible moment. The deepest irony is that his sudden death cut short what had been a spectacular career comeback. He deserves to be remembered for his entire journey, not just its heartbreaking conclusion. Ultimately, his final act, generously giving up his seat on that fateful flight, serves as a perfect reflection of his character. And while the world remembers the hit songs, his true legacy may be simpler, a legacy not just of great music, but of quiet, unassuming goodness.